Imagine for a moment that The Sopranos didn't end on a black screen. Imagine the camera kept rolling. What happens to New Jersey the morning after? Who runs the family? Who collects the envelopes? Who answers the phone when little Carmine calls from New York? The honest answer, the answer the show was telling you the entire time, is that nobody does. Because by the time Holston's went dark, the DeMeo crime family wasn't a family anymore. It was a corpse that hadn't been told to fall down. To understand why New Jersey couldn't survive, you have to understand what New Jersey actually was. Not in the real world, in the show's universe. Throughout 6 seasons, David Chase plants the same insult in different mouths. Carmine Lupertazzi Sr. dismisses them with the line, "Family? They're a glorified crew."
They're a glorified crew.
Years later, in the war episode The Blue Comet, Phil Leotardo will quote that same Carmine line back to his men, and then deliver his own version. 5 fucking families, and we got this other pygmy thing over in Jersey.
5 fucking families. And we got this other pygmy thing over in Jersey.
And here's the uncomfortable truth. He wasn't wrong. The Lupertazzi family in the Sopranos universe, one of the 5 families, was estimated at roughly 200 made men, a deep bench of capos. Real estate in Manhattan, real estate in Brooklyn, and by season 6, real estate in Tony's own backyard when Johnny Sack moved his family to New Jersey. The DeMeos? Roughly 60 made men, 5 or 6 thinning crews, 1 major construction kickback, 1 esplanade they had to share, 1 waste management contract about to expire, a family that needed New York's permission to breathe. When the show begins, Jackie Aprile Sr. is dying of cancer, and the entire administration is 1 funeral away from chaos. By the time Tony actually takes the seat, his closest men are talking to the FBI, and more of them are about to start. Jersey wasn't a kingdom, it was a tributary state, and the king upstate was running out of patience. So when people argue about Tony's mistakes, the pussy delay, the Richie problem, the Ralph horse, the Christopher promotion, they're arguing about whether the captain of the Titanic should have turned left or right. The iceberg was always going to win. Every boss is only as good as the men around him, and Tony Soprano's bench was a graveyard before the show was halfway over. Look at who he started with. Big Pussy Bonpensiero, an FBI informant. Jimmy Altieri, suspected rat, executed in the season 1 finale. Ray Curto, a long-running FBI informant who died of a stroke before anyone in the family knew. By season 6, Carlo Gervasi flips to save his son's drug bust, and Adriana, fiancé of his hand-picked protege, was informing for the FBI for the entire back half of her engagement. That's not bad luck. That's a structural problem. The DeMeo family was hemorrhaging from inside, and Tony spent half his time chasing leaks instead of building power. Now look at who he promoted. Christopher Moltisanti, brilliant, loyal, and a heroin addict whose addiction would eventually be what got him killed. Ralph Cifaretto, the family's top earner, and a sociopath who beat his pregnant girlfriend Tracy to death in the Bada Bing parking lot.
It's all right, Vito was one of us.
Vito Spatafore, closeted, exposed, and ultimately a non-starter in a culture that wouldn't bend an inch. Bobby Bacala, sweet, competent, and the only good soldier left, until he wasn't. Compare that to New York. When Carmine Sr. dies without naming a successor, the Lupertazzis fall into a civil war. Johnny Sack against little Carmine, with Phil Leotardo just out of 20 years inside, ready to be a power broker. And as each boss falls, Johnny to a federal indictment, Doc Santoro to Phil's gunman, there's always another captain in line. Jerry Torsiano, Butchie DiConcini, a family deep enough to bleed and keep walking. In Jersey, Tony promoted Christopher to capo because there was literally no one better. Not because Chrissy earned it, because the next generation didn't exist. And here's the truth most fans refuse to say out loud. Tony Soprano's biggest failure wasn't the decisions he made about his men. It was that he was the only man in the room qualified to make decisions at all. The DeMeo family had one boss. And one boss isn't a family, it's a bottleneck. Every Sopranos fan has their pet theory for when it all started. Some point to Tony Blundetto and the murder of Billy Leotardo. Some point to Paulie spilling the Ginny Sack joke. Some point to Vito Spatafore being spotted at a gay bar in New York. They're all right, and they're all wrong. Because the war with New York wasn't caused by any single event. The war was structural. Phil Leotardo did 20 years in prison and came out in 2004 with one philosophy. New York was the mafia, and everybody else was a guest at the table. He was always going to come for Jersey. The only question was when, but Tony handed him the timing. Let's run the tape. Phil and Billy Leotardo kill Tony B's prison friend, Angelo Gareppi. Tony B retaliates by killing Billy, unsanctioned. Tony refuses to give up his cousin for execution, then kills Tony B himself to spare him from torture. Years of bad blood compound. Then, Vito gets caught at a gay bar in New York. Phil has him beaten to death without sanction. Jersey can't fully retaliate without starting a war, but when Phil's soldier, Fat Dom Gamiello, comes to Satriali's and makes jokes about it, Silvio and Carlo kill him in the back room. Then comes the asbestos dispute.
Just now find out.
Then the no-show jobs. Then Coco Cogliano, Butchie's man, sexually harasses Meadow at a Little Italy cafe, and Tony walks into Coco's own restaurant the next day with a gun, pistol whips Coco in front of Butchie, and curb stomps his teeth out on the fireplace. The flame finds the gasoline. And here's the part Tony's defenders skip over. By the end of the war, look at Tony's bench again. Christopher, suffocated by Tony on the side of the road after a car crash. Bobby, gunned down in a model train store. Silvio, riddled with bullets, in a coma he's never waking up from. Vito, beaten to death. Tony B, shot by Tony himself. Ralph, long dead. Furio, fled to Italy. Tony is sitting in a diner booth with his family and a plate of onion rings, surrounded by ghosts. He won the war on paper. Phil's head was crushed by his own SUV at a gas station in front of his wife and grandchildren. Cinematic, final. But who's left to collect?
Larry! Call a fucking lawyer!
Larry Baracci, in the can. Carlo, about to testify. Patsy, competent but unproven. Paulie Walnuts.
He's gotta be dead by now, right?
How could he not be?
This is the part that makes the closing season hit so hard on rewatch. Tony didn't just lose his crew, he outlasted them. He became a boss without a kingdom, sitting on a throne built out of dead friends, eating an onion ring like nothing matters anymore, because nothing did. Here's a thought experiment. Pretend Tony walks out of Holston's. Pretend he eats the onion ring and goes home to Carmela. Pretend the FBI indictment never comes. Pretend, somehow, he gets to be 80. The DeMeo family still doesn't survive. And the show is begging you to see it. Because there is nobody left to take over. Not really. Paulie is the senior man, but Paulie is a guy who left a wounded Russian alive in the woods of Pine Barrens, and spent years not knowing if he'd ever come back. Patsy Parisi is sharp, but Patsy is a soldier with a head for numbers, not a leader with a base of power. Larry Baris is going away on federal charges. Bobby is dead. Silvio will never wake up. Christopher is dead on a New Jersey roadside. In every real-world example, a family that loses its administration and its top earners doesn't bounce back. It gets absorbed. The remaining crews get distributed to whichever neighboring family is strong enough to claim them. And in the Sopranos universe, that family is, of course, the Lupertazis, now run by Butchie DeConcini, who in The Blue Comet says it out loud. They got redundant upper management, bleeds off half the kick. We take them out, absorb the whole fucking thing.
Got redundant upper management, bleeds off half the kick. We take them out, absorb the whole fucking thing.
That isn't subtext. That's the plan, said into a camera. This is why the famous theory that Butchie sanctioned Tony's hit even after sanctioning Phil's death isn't just plausible, it's the only ending that makes structural sense. Phil dies. Tony dies. Jersey is leaderless. Butchie absorbs the remaining crews. The DeMeo name disappears within a year. The Esplanade money flows uptown. The waste contract evaporates. By the time AJ is figuring out which finance internship to quit, the family that produced him doesn't exist anymore, and the rest of America catches up to something fans of the real mob already knew. The De Cavalcante family, the real New Jersey outfit that inspired the show, had been gutted by federal prosecutions and informants by the late 2000s, reduced from a few dozen made men to a shadow of what it once was. Still hanging on, never the same. Life imitated David Chase. Or maybe David Chase was just paying attention. Tony Soprano didn't kill the New Jersey mob. He just outlived it. The Sopranos isn't really a show about a mafia boss. It's a show about the slow, undignified death of an entire institution, and one man who's too smart to deny it and too proud to step away. Think about it.
I came in at the end.
In the very first session with Dr. Melfi, Tony tells her he came in at the end. The best is over. His father had it better. Even his uncle had it better. By the time Tony inherited the chair, the codes were already broken. The earners were already informants. The streets were already condos. The made guys were already wearing shorts. Every decision he made, good or bad, was a decision made on a sinking ship. The Ralph killing, the Christopher promotion, even the Tony B refusal. The moment most fans pin as the beginning of the end was just Tony picking the least bad option in a room with no good ones. That's what Junior tells him in season 3. In the episode He Is Risen, Tony comes to Junior's house wrestling with the Ralph situation, and Junior, in one of his last lucid moments, gives him the wisdom. That's what being a boss is. You steer the ship the best way you know. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes you hit the rocks. In the meantime, you find your pleasures where you can.
Sometimes smooth, sometimes you hit the rock. In the meantime, you find your pleasures where you can.
That's not failure, that's the job. Tony Soprano didn't ruin New Jersey. He just was its last boss. And maybe that's the saddest sentence you can say about a man who spent 6 seasons trying not to be. So the next time someone tells you Tony was a bad boss, that he should have given up his cousin, that he should have whacked Ralph sooner, that he should have promoted anybody but Christopher, remember this. He was a boss whose family was already dying when he inherited it. He just bought it a few more years than anybody else could have. And then the lights went out at Holston's. I want to know what you think. If Tony had given up Tony B to Phil that day, does the family survive? Or was the iceberg always going to win? Drop your answer in the comments. The honest ones, please. No whatever happened there.